All right, now that we're done with our quick write, I want us to move over, create a little bit of space, set our quick write over to the side, and we're going to jump into our chapter 5. There's 2 things that I need to build some background with in chapter 5. So I know this is going to be a review for most of you, but I want you to think in your head right now, what is a homonym? Turn to a brother, turn to a sister, a family member, and tell them, what do you remember about homonyms? I'm going to pause again. Click play when you're ready. Okay, perfect. Get ready, pat yourself on the back. If you said a homonym is a word that has different spelling but has the same meaning as another word. So I'll give you an example. You could have the word pear, right? Both words pear. So you could have a pear that you picked from a tree, or you have a pair of shoes on the ground, right? So if you got that right, give yourself a little pat on the back. Chapter 5 here has lots of homonyms all through the chapter. And I want you to think if you can pick out 3 as we read through chapter 5. What? There's another one? The words meet and meet. Great. So you can meet someone, you can say hello, greet them, and then meat, like in science, we learned carnivores eat meat only, right? So another pair of homonyms. Great. All right. Are you guys ready to jump in? Oh, one more thing, right? It's 2 focuses. The second focus is that we learned about Sophie and where she lives, right? In chapter 5, we learned more about kind of the area around Sophie. So I'm going to split the screen here. I'm going to look at a couple different maps. Let me see if I can get this all ready to go. Perfect. Can you see it? Not now. All right, here we go. So you should be able to see the second screen, right? Who remembers where Sophie lives? England, right? So if you look over here at this island over here, it's called the United Kingdom. This is connected to part of the continent of Europe, yes. So if we look over here, England is part of the United Kingdom, right? So Sophie is from England when the giant snatches her out of her bed. If we zoom over to the other picture here, this is our continent of Europe, right? And below Europe is Africa. So in chapter 5, they talk about a couple different countries. And so I just wanted to point them out so you kind of were thinking about where this would be, right? So again, here's our United Kingdom. Here's England, where Sophie started out the book. And we're not really sure where Giant Country is yet, right? However, they're going to talk about the country of Turkey. You might hear about the country of Greece right over here across the Mediterranean Sea. Lost my sticky. Also, you'll hear about Denmark, which is up here. It's another country in Europe. And Wales, which is also in the United Kingdom. If I swipe over the other picture and we blow it up, so England's over here, Wales is over here next to England. So I just want to give you a little background knowledge on where those countries that you might hear from pop up. So see if I can get out of here. All right, I'm back. So again, the 2 focuses were think about where those countries are, and the other focus was see if you can find 2, 3, challenge yourself and see 4 homonyms as we read chapter 5. All right, ready to go? Let me grab my book. Title of chapter 5 is the BFG. Right? And you guys have your own books that you can go ahead and follow along, or your own packets. I'd like you to follow along with your finger as you listen to me read. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. Now he was really going to eat me, Sophie thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears. Each one was as big as the wheel of a truck, and he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished. I is hungry, the giant boomed. He grinned, showing massive square teeth. The teeth were very white and very square, and they sat in his mouth like huge slices of white bread. Please don't eat me, Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. Just because I is a giant, you think I is a man gobbling cannibal? He shouted. You is about right. Giants is all canny-bully and murderful, and they does gobble up human beings. We is in giant country now. Giants is everywhere around. Out there, us has the famous bone-crunching giant. Bone-crunching giant crunches up 2 wopsy, whiffling human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear-busting. Noise of crunching bones goes cracky-crack for miles around. Ouch, Sophie said. Bone-crunching giant only gobbles human beings from Turkey, the giant said. That was one of the countries we saw. Every night, Bone Cruncher is galloping off to Turkey to gobble Turks. Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. Why, Turks, she blurted out. What's wrong with the English? Bone-crunching giant says Turks is tasting ever so much juicier and more scrumdiddlyumptious. Bone Cruncher says Turkish human beings has a glamourly flavor. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of turkey. I suppose they would, Sophie said. Of course they would, the giant shouted. Every human being is diddly and different. Some is scrumdiddlyumptious and some is ucky slush. Greeks is all full of ucky slush. No giant is eating Greeks ever. Why not? Sophie asked. Greeks from Greece is all tasting, can you guess? Greasy, the giant said. I imagine that's possible too, Sophie said. She was wondering with a bit of a tremble what all this talking about eating people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she simply must play along with this peculiar giant and smile at all his jokes. But were they jokes? Perhaps the great brute was just working up an appetite by talking about food. As I'm saying, the giant went on, all human beings is having different flavors. Human beings from Panama is tasting very strong of hats. Why hats? Sophie asked. You is not very clever, the giant said, moving his great ears in and out. I thought all human beings is full of brains, but your head is emptier than a boondoggle. Do you like vegetables? Sophie asked, hoping to steer. There's also a picture on this page. Sophie asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards a slightly less dangerous kind of food. You was trying to change the subject, the giant said sternly. We is having an interesting babblement about the taste of human being. The human being is not a vegetable. Oh, but the bean is a vegetable, Sophie said. Not the human being, the giant said. The human being has 2 legs and a vegetable has no legs at all. Sophie didn't argue anymore. The last thing she wanted to do was to make the giant cross. The human being, the giant went on, is coming in dillions of different flavors. For instance, human beings from Wales is tasting very whooshy of fish. There is something very fishy about Wales. You mean Wales, Sophie said. Wales is something quite different. Wales is Wales, the giant said. Don't gobble funk around with words. I will now give you another example. Human beings from Jersey has a most disgustable woolly tickle on the tongue, the giant said. Human beings from Jersey is tasting of cardigans. You mean jerseys, Sophie said. You are once again gobble funking, the giant shouted. Don't do it. This is a serious and snitching subject. May I continue? Please do, Sophie said. Danes from Denmark is tasting ever so much of the dogs, the giant went on. Of course, Sophie said. They taste of Great Danes. Wrong, cried the giant, slapping his thigh. Danes from Denmark is tasting doggy because they is tasting of Labradors. Then what do people of Labrador taste of? Sophie asked. Danes, the giant cried triumphantly. Great Danes. Aren't you getting a bit mixed up? Sophie said. I is a very mixed up giant, the giant said, but I does do my best, and I is not nearly as mixed up as the other giants. I know one who gallops all the way to Wellington for his supper. Wellington, Sophie said. Where is Wellington? Your head is full of squash flies, the giant said. Wellington is in New Zealand. The human beings in Wellington has an especially scrumdiddlyumptious taste. So says the welly-eating giant. What do the people of Wellington taste of? Sophie asked. Boots, the giant said. Of course, Sophie said, I should have known. Sophie decided that this conversation had now gone on long enough. If she was going to be eaten, she'd rather get it over and done with right away than be kept hanging around anymore. What sort of human beings do you eat? She asked, trembling. Me, shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars rattle on their shelves. Me gobbling up human beings? This, I never. The others, yes, all the others is gobbling them up every night. But not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice and jumbly giant. I is the only nice and jumbly giant in giant country. I is the big, friendly giant. I is the BFG. What is your name? My name is Sophie, Sophie said, hardly daring to believe the good news she had just heard.